Some paths lead you through straight and narrow. Others have bumps and turns. And sometimes the path can lead you to the rest of your life. Welcome to Ending the Stigma, a path to recovery.
Okay, everybody. Welcome to our 5th episode of Removing the Stigma, a path to recovery. I'm your host, Fred Carroll. Once again, joined by my friend Scott H. Silverman, life crisis coach and birthday boy, right? Tomorrow. And our guest today is my fellow podcast friend, Tim. How do you say your name, Tim?
Bicycle, like you're saying bye to a seagull. Bye, seagull.
Bye, seagull. Tim joining us for a bit because I think he fits our structure. He's someone else that runs a similar show. It's called Focused on Forward and is a mental health and wellness show. So welcome to our show, Tim. How are you tonight?
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm doing really well. I'm had a chance to take a little bit of a mental respite, a little bit of a break, and it's been a nice change of pace from the last year and a half of living indoors. So it's been nice.
Yeah, good. Why don't you, before we move on to your show and stuff, let me tell everybody that the phone line is closed tonight because we're on StreamYard versus Zoom. But if you still have an issue or a family member, loved one, friend, neighbor, etc., who needs assistance, or you have a success story of overcoming an issue, feel free to write in any of the comments that are on. We're live on my page on Facebook, our Stigma page group page on Facebook, and we're live on our YouTube page. So how are you, Scott? You doing well?
I'm well. I like the way you welcome Tim to our structure, and you keep referring to what we do as a structure, and I appreciate that because we don't have a structure, and you know it. The only thing that we structure is we pray that you push all the right buttons so we look better, younger, thinner, taller, and don't look like I do, that put on weight during the virus. So I'm doing well, thank you. As you shared, tomorrow's my birthday, and I ordered myself a new microphone. I don't know why. And it's just an excuse. And I had a gift card from a Zoom I did a couple of weeks ago for somebody. So I used that to pay for half the mic. But I'm good, man. I'm excited. I'm excited about the topic tonight, and Tim and I have some history, all good stuff. That was pretty structured what we did. But, I look to Fred to kind of set our topics up, over on Happy Hour, my podcast. I kind of bring in guests and we do a topic around the guests themselves. So, what we're doing here with, the end of the stigma is so important. And, once Fred figures out that the new platform we're on, we're going to take calls, and we're looking forward to that. Because I think it's important to hear from people, whatever's topical. And, I was in 2 hours of some structured meetings today, and I'm on a lot of different panels because I want to hear, what's changing, what's going on, what's happening with PTSD, how are we treating mental health today? And I heard some fascinating things today, which was unusual from this group, but it was really cool. And so I'm glad to be here. And Tim, welcome to you. And, I'm anxious to hear you do a data dump tonight on this structured program of Fred.
It'll be fun.
Yeah. So I just come here to laugh on Fridays because, he has a couple shows, and one of them's all about, comedy. Like my dogs, they laugh as well. And I'm not necessarily a comedian, but I like to bring humor to everything that I can, and I work on topics like opioid morbidity rates and, access to treatment. So it's nice to be able to smile about what we're doing, because what we're doing is helping people smile.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And kudos to your dogs for their structured and timed laughter. That was awesome.
Yep.
So
that's not structured either. I mean, we just can't control it. And we've trained them, I keep engaging and sitting down with them and looking them in the eye. But, I'm probably a little better with people. Sometimes those who are not in a coma, I can work with differently as well.
There you go.
So last week we dove into 2 sections. The first one, eating disorders. Jennifer involved. Jennifer's tonight, if anyone's looking for her, she's working. And then Scott and I delved a bit into cocaine. Not personally. We didn't actually delve into cocaine. We spoke about cocaine. Actually, we both admitted that we have delved into cocaine.
Yeah, but Fred, you're kind of cheap, and my sense would be you wouldn't bring enough. So I'm not about to breach my sobriety for a quarter gram and half a straw you got from McDonald's to engage. So
yeah, it's definitely gonna be a problem. But tonight let's openly discuss mental health, and mental health we could never fit this into one live show. So we're just gonna hit on the basics of mental health and what it means and stuff like that. So I'm going to let you guys talk amongst yourselves about mental health, what it means to you. But first, let's hear about Tim's Focused on Forward podcast. Talk about that for a few with Scott while I do some production stuff.
Yeah, but let me just suggest, Tim, if you don't mind, whatever you say tonight, try to do it in a structured way so we can fit inside of Fred's head. Okay? All right, buddy. Looking forward to hearing what you got.
All right. So, I started Focused on Forward after we came home from the hospital with my daughter. My daughter had spent 97 days in the hospital. 33 of those were in the ICU. We nearly lost her twice due to a condition called Guillain-Barré syndrome. Before we went to the hospital, we had no clue what that was. I'd never heard of it. Didn't know it was a thing. And really what it ended up being is a life-changing structure. See, I use the word structure. It changed the entire structure of our life. It really did, because my daughter went from being a healthy, happy 12-year-old girl to being a girl with a central nervous issue, an autoimmune issue that she's going to have for the rest of her life. So she's about 85% recovered. Her doctors feel that that's probably as most as she's going to get. That's going to probably be her plateau. But the problem that leaves is that there's some physical issues that are left over. There's some neurological issues, some muscle issues, joint issues that are all residuals left over from the hospitalization and the medications and really from Guillain-Barré. So what that means is that there's been some changes that we've had to make. We call it finding our new normal, and we call it keep moving forward. So when we came home from the hospital, one of the biggest challenges I had was understanding that my brain had gone through some trauma as a parent, and understanding that that trauma was a very real thing, and that it was completely okay for me as a man to say that I was not okay. And it was okay for me to reach out to somebody else to give me the help that I needed in that instance, and admit to somebody else outside of my wife that I was not okay. And so after some therapy and some sessions and things, I decided that because I do like talking to people, that maybe I could try and help other people share their stories. Because I think one of the great things about podcasting is, in these instances, you get to hear other people's stories, what they've been through, what they've gone through, the problems and struggles that they've had in their life. And it's amazing to be able to hear somebody else talk about, even if it doesn't exactly fit what you've been through, even if it's, I call it a lane adjacent. If it's lane adjacent to what you've gone through in life, it's how cool is it to be able to look and say, man, they did it. Somebody else went through this. They were able to do it. And you can draw strength and courage and power from somebody else's story. And so that's what I want to do on Focused on Forward. If we have the opportunity to share somebody's story and somebody else can listen to that and say, oh man, that's similar to what's happened to me, or that's similar to what I've had to go through. And they can draw courage from that to be able to push forward in their life, then, I'm thrilled. Even if it only affects one person an episode, I'm thrilled.
So Tim, thank you for sharing that. And that's what an experience to have. I can't even imagine what it feels like. So, Fred and I identified that we have 4 fans that like to tune in. So would you share with our 4 fans? Well, with Fred and I, that's 6. That's what gets us that structure. What is it you do during the day when you're not doing podcasts? Because my guess would be that, you were probably doing something full time, and I'm sure you still are. And then podcasting became a conduit for you to not only express yourself, but get others to do it as well. And I think when it comes to treating untreated trauma, listening to somebody else who suffers is not only great for them, but I find, because I do it all day long, it's great for me to hear from others. And sometimes I don't get a chance to talk when I'm talking to somebody who's in crisis. But they just need to be able to know that someone's there to listen.
Sure. Yeah. So during the day, I work. My father owns a graphic design company, and we're sign makers by trade. And so I work for him, and I sell silly T-shirts online. I do logo design and things like that.
Cool.
So that's what I do during the day. And I've always been a talker, though, and that's why I was in sales for so long and able to go out and talk to people and do cold calls, because I didn't, where other people have that shame gland and they can't step up in front of people and talk. I didn't have that. I've always been the kid in school where there had to be the presentation up in front of the class, and they're like, "Oh my God, who's going to talk?" I'm like, "Well, I can do it."
Have you ever heard the term megaphone face? That was my nickname in school.
I've been told I have a face for radio, but I was never called megaphone face. But
megaphone face, no voice,
same diff.
Hey, Fred, I'm sorry, one sec, Fred. I just make a note because I see you've got your pen out there that Tim does shirts and hats.
Yes,
Fred,
I noted it.
Okay, very good, because I don't think we have a logo yet, and we don't have shirts and hats. And when I help my daughters go negotiate a lease on a car, well, what do you want, Dad, for helping out? I said, just get me a hat.
There you go.
So I've got these Volkswagen hats, these Chevy hats. I don't wear them. I just make the sales manager, when they get pissed about the offer I counter. They say, "Is there anything else, Mr. Silverman?" I said, "Yes, I'd like a hat."
I will need a hat, please.
So, Tim, are your shows available on Apple and Spotify?
Oh yeah.
And
the only podcast destination you will not find ours on currently, and I'm looking at switching hosting sites as of the moment. So I'm kind of playing apples and oranges with all the 100,000 podcast hosting sites out there. But the only one that you can't find us on right now is Stitcher, because Stitcher and Anchor don't play well together. But I'm on Apple, Google, Spotify, iHeart, Pandora, Amazon, Audible, you name it, you'll find us.
Yeah. Okay.
Except for Stitcher, because they're jerks.
Yeah.
And are you on a lot of the Facebook pages? Because I just got on those a few months ago, and it's people, drop your links. I drop my links, never hear from anybody. And this one guy in Australia is always inviting people. Hey, if you'd like to be on the show, just let me know. Put your name. I put my name. He never calls me. I don't know. But there's a lot of I think there's something like 700,000 podcasts now going on in this country alone.
Well, it exploded in 2020.
Right.
Podcasting absolutely exploded in 2020.
Yeah.
Because people
That's
had
when I
time
started.
on their hands. Well, yeah, I started in 2019, end of 2019, with Focused on Forward, and I started in September of 2020 for Funny Science Fiction. So, but so I belong to a bunch of these different podcasting pages, but you have to pick your battles, which one you're going to join and which one you're going to stay with, and you find out which ones are a true community and are willing to help and support. And that's a very rare thing in this. Fred and I belong to a couple of similar pages, and I like and share a lot of Fred's stuff, because what Fred's doing, I think, is really good, and I'm glad to see a lot of the stuff with you as well, and I'm glad to see you guys are working together.
Fred actually adopted me. We signed the papers. It took a little longer because I'm in California. It required the Attorney General certification and an escrow, and we had to do a background check on Fred. That took a little while as well.
Yeah.
He has the one podcast inside of Fred's head, and then he has Fred's Home for Wayward Strays. I think that's where he picked you up at. So
yeah.
I'm
not sure.
Somebody just typed in, I just want to say thank you for the amazing work you are doing and for the show each week. I'm glad that there is a place people can go and have their stories heard, and there is someone to listen and help. Again, thank you. So
that's awesome.
And that's not your family, because it's certainly not my family writing that in right now.
No, my family doesn't actually watch the shows.
I send my links to my kids, and one of them, loves PR, and I called her the other night. I said, "What'd you think of the piece I did in Detroit?" And she's like, "Can I call you back?" I said, "Okay."
Yeah.
So
So she could watch it.
I said, yeah, I said half an hour later. She said, "Look, Dad, I promise I'll look at it tonight and I'll call you back with feedback." I said, "Forget it." I hung up the phone and then I blocked her. I think that was the number 4 item on the disorder list is, patience with people.
Yeah.
So Tim, what else would you want people to know that, whether it's a podcaster or listener or, and I love this idea. It'd be nice to, at some point we get, I want to be part of the community, and my community is more helping what you guys do. I think, you're learning to do this is, I just kind of come on and talk and then be a resource and give out my phone number. I did it the other day on a live television show in Detroit, and I've had over 30 calls this week and probably 8 texts. And the one person yesterday, I didn't tell you this earlier, Fred called, and she said, "Are you the guy that was on Channel 2? I said, "Yeah." She said, "I need help." I said, "Well, how can I help?" She said, "Well, I need money." And I said, "Well, so do I. So how can we help each other?" And she hung up. But that really wasn't that wasn't really the purpose. But I just I answered the question with a question. I don't know if she was offended or she's just shopping, but I couldn't really help her with what she needed. But I've had some interesting calls. And
sure.
What's fascinating is most of the things that people say, that the heart of the core, that if you had to put a soundbite is, no one answers their phone. No one talks to them. No one returns a phone call. They don't know who to call. I'm just talking to somebody. And I invite everybody to call me back in a week. And if they call back in a week, then I'm going to introduce them to our show here and see if we can get them to come tell their story after they've gotten some suggestions.
It's definitely going to be good. We do have guests coming up, and we plan on having more guests. You're a guest. You're our first. Is he our first guest?
Yeah.
Ever?
First structured guest.
Yay! Win for me.
Win for you. But I want to tell people that usually we do a segment with my friend Mel, the science gal. But today I watched this also, but Mel was busy giving her 3rd-year seminar on, okay, here it is. Let's see if I can say it. Prebiotic synthesis of nucleic acid building blocks. And I watched it for an hour. I recognized about 4 to 10 words that she said, but I watched it. So congratulations to her. She's only got one more step and she's a PhD.
That's awesome. And you may have been 4 or 10 words ahead of me, Fred.
Yeah.
So.
Well, listen, this girl, I thought she said building blocks. I'm thinking Legos. I was in. I was all in. But boy, is she. I realized I did not pay attention in science class because the things she was showing me, it was like speaking another language. But she'll be back with us. She's a friend of mine's daughter, and she's at the University of Rochester getting her PhD.
That's awesome.
She's a fan of the show. She's a big supporter of mental health and stuff like that. So she sends us little nuggets of scientific facts to do with whether it's cocaine, eating disorders, and such. So she does the
research, which is great. So we have contemporized information. So when the really smart people listen in, they can't say, "Who do you people think you are?" And we just say we're quoting an expert who is an advocate for research to bringing data to the forefront on our platform.
Right.
There you go. Perfect.
Well, let's move into talking about some of these disorders that are out there. I am reading from a website where I got all this information. So first we'll start with anxiety disorders, which I would say are very common in today's world. I know my children have anxiety disorders.
That's me.
And I don't know what I have anymore. I mean, like Scott was saying, I think I fall under all these categories one time in my life or one way or another. So it's got to be very confusing and hard for people to pinpoint exactly what they're suffering from. It's got to be an issue, because I'm sure you could have an anxiety and behavioral. You could have more than one working at the same time, and it's got to be confusing. But anxiety disorder is people that respond to certain objects or situations with fear or with dread. So that's something you deal with, Tim?
Yeah, actually, I am well medicated for that.
Yeah.
So, that was part of. I had anxiety before my daughter's situation. Like I can't even go back to the hospital where she was at without almost having a full-blown panic attack. After my daughter got out of the hospital, just as a for instance, and not to derail the conversation here, but as a for instance, we intended on going back to the hospital and giving the nurses and the doctors in the ICU a small thank you gift. Because frankly, if you've never had to see doctors in a pediatric ICU, these nurses and these doctors are heaven sent. They do a work that I could never do. I would crumble daily. It's just, I can't say enough good things about them, but we went to go give them a gift just as a small thank you. I couldn't go. Just the thought of going into the hospital. And now the Children's Hospital in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is called DeVos Children's Hospital, which is one of the top, it's in the top 5 in the nation. It's an amazing, amazing place for kids if they're sick, is attached to the main portion of the hospital, separated by a hallway and some doors. We had a friend who was sick in the main part of the hospital a couple weeks after we got home. Just walking back through those doors into the main portion of the hospital, I did have a panic attack and I had to leave the building. I couldn't even go up to see my friend who was sick at that time. So, there are things that are going to trigger you when you have anxiety. And many times it's not even a fear of the unknown. It's the fear of the known. And then it's the complication of the what ifs. What if I smell this thing? Because a lot of times it can be associated with sights or smells. What if I smell this thing? What if I see this thing or this person or that thing or whatever it may be that triggers your anxiety? So for me, it was thought and sight induced.
Yeah, and it definitely, anxiety in itself, like I said, I don't suffer from having anxiety, and when my children did, I was so not prepared for it. I didn't know how to attack. I think I attacked it like I attack most things, wrong. Mm-hmm. And my first initial thing is, well, don't think about it. It's like telling an alcoholic, well, don't drink.
Right.
Get another job. Like my ex-wife.
Right.
My ex-wife suffers from a lot of depressions, and I used to say, well, maybe you got to get another job. You'll be too tired to be depressed. And it's such a horrible thing to say, not a good thing to say. But
not an uncommon response from people, because until you get education around what it really means and what it takes for treatment and how to know if you really, do suffer. I continually tell people, go online and Google it. I actually had a conversation with someone today who is experiencing menopause. And she said that 20 years ago, she used to do a lot of drugs. And right now what's happening is her husband is reacting in a way that he thinks she's using again. And I said, go online, have him sit with you and just Google menopause. My wife went through it. My sisters went through it. It's, she goes, I feel like I'm going nuts. And I said, well, I think that's a symptom of menopause. So if it's true, and that's what you're experiencing, it certainly will, you look it up. And that way you've got third party validation so you don't have to explain yourself, because you're helping inform somebody who may just be scared that they're going to go through what they did before. Exactly. So go ahead, Fred.
So the second thing is behavioral disorders, and that involves a pattern of disruptive behaviors in children that lasts for at least 6 months and causes problems in school, at home, social situations. An example would include attention deficit hyperactive disorder, which is very common, conduct disorder, and oppositional defiant disorder. So ADHD and ODD. So I think we all know somebody with a child with what there is diagnosed as ADHD, and it's interesting. It's an interesting, I don't even know what the word is, to deal with, to watch them deal with it. I'm glad my children didn't suffer from that, because I don't know if I have that type of patience. You need a lot of patience.
You do, because it's like trying to juggle 12 balls up in the air all at once and not paying attention to any of them. I know several people who have ADHD, and some of them are high functioning, and able to have learned ways and means to kind of cope with it and work with it. And some have found that through counseling and some forms of medication that it has helped them. And much like many other things, because each of our bodies is uniquely different, what works for me may not work for you when it comes to the medications. Those, I know some people who the medications just do not work for, and they have to rely upon what they've picked up and learned from counseling or therapy.
Right. And the next one is eating disorders, which we covered.
I don't want to talk about it, Fred.
Yeah, a large part over.
I'm in denial.
The next one is substance use disorders.
I don't want to talk about that one either.
Well, we know plenty about substance use disorders.
Sure.
And Scott lived that life. He really gets it. Let me show the next. I'm trying to. So here's somebody that said, I've been struggling with depression, anxiety since middle school. Took me over 10 years to finally ask for help and stop using drugs and alcohol to numb how I was feeling. Asking for help is definitely the hardest step to take, but you never look back once you take that step.
Those are my magic words, the three of the hardest. I need help. Once you can articulate that outwardly to somebody else, once you can get that out of your brain and have someone else hear it, it's almost like you've just gotten the combination to a door that'll put you on a path for transformation. But it does take that, level of acceptance, if you will, to know that you are powerless over what's going on. And then there's help and hope. Yeah, keep going, Fred. Good list. By the way, we went over this list earlier, and I unfortunately suffer from all of them. But no, good news is I've had treatment for most of them, I think.
And the thing is, too, guys, if you look down this list, the name of your show that you're doing tonight applies to every single one of them. There's been a stigma attached to every single one of these issues. And there's a reason why people are nervous and afraid to come forward and talk about these things, because there's a stigma attached. How will they be perceived by their family and friends? Are people going to look at them weird or treat them differently because they have something that they need to work through? Right. These things don't make us bad people. They don't make us wrong as humans or anything less than the person next to us. It just means that we have something different to work on than they have something to work on.
Yeah, so exactly. It's everybody has something. It's whether or not you come forward with it.
And if you choose to acknowledge it, yeah.
And it's become easier. It is becoming easier as we.
I work with professionals in the field, first responders, doctors, and lawyers. And when I hear somebody say, "Well, if I raised my hand and I shared, it would be a career killer." There was that pilot I remember reading about a couple of years ago in the UK who actually ended up taking his own life because he left a note, or the family knew about it, but he suffered from mental illness, and he just was afraid to raise his hand because he didn't want to lose his independence to be a pilot, and ended up taking his own life because he just didn't want to disclose it to anybody. And when you hear stories like that someone just feels like they'd rather, and not rather in their life, but they end up ending their life because they were unable to articulate what was going on, and people around them didn't pick up on it, or whatever happened, whatever the circumstance was. It's just a shame. I mean, a life lost where there's actually hope and help and treatment. So
yeah, there's so many different things that go on in people's lives. And one thing, like Tim was saying, his daughter's thing had a ripple effect on his mental health. And that's how it works for everybody. But the one thing is mood disorders. So mood disorders involve persistent feelings of sadness or periods of feeling overly happy, or fluctuating between happiness and extreme sadness. And mood disorders can include depression, bipolar disorder, seasonal affect disorder, and self-harm. So those are, I hate to use the word popular. What's the word? Common?
Common.
Yeah, common, I guess, not popular. Let's not make it popular. Let's make it uncommon. But it is common. You hear a lot about these things that fall under mood disorders.
Absolutely.
And I want to point something out. If you took this whole list and we were to do a survey approximately 14 months ago, okay, prior to this COVID issue and what's happened to people's life changes that they had to go through, to being at home, the loss of job, the catastrophic events, and you took a survey now, my sense would be that if you were at a 1 or 2 with any of these, you're probably north of a 7 or 8 right now. And the funny thing is, accessing treatment this last year was next to not impossible, but everybody went virtual. I run an outpatient program. We were mask to mask, because we could, and we did virtual as well. But people were not able to get out of the house, and the social model, Tim and I talking to each other about how we feel, what we've experienced, and that's what happens in the rooms of recovery. When that shut down, it gave a lot of people a rationale. Hey, I don't have to be accountable. No, I'm going to get loaded. Relapses were horrendous this last year. And that led to some people losing their own lives around it. So my point is, it's funny, Fred, that you brought this topic up for this week to discuss, but the mental health issues, behavioral health issues, untreated trauma, sadness, the inability to process feelings because you're just, you're full of fear, or you've just got your feet nailed to the floor, whatever the explanation is, know that there's hope and help out there. There's crisis hotlines that became because of this last year, 800 numbers everywhere. And if you're hearing this, just Google it. I am suffering from depression. I have an eating disorder. Google it and watch what pops up. But before you make decisions, give us a call and we'll help guide you through it. Because that's what most of us need, is somebody who's willing to say, hey, let's talk about this.
Right. And remember to also, when you do Google it, not to get into the rabbit hole that Jennifer was discussing a few shows ago, that it could also be a danger to you.
You have to know when to say when,
Right.
Well, I said it.
Where to pump the brakes.
Check in with us. I mean, if it's an emergency, obviously 911, and you have people that you trust, your family physician, your primary care doctor, your faith-based leader, good friend, a family member, coworker, a colleague, somebody somewhere, that if you're bouncing this off of them, they'll hold your hand. When you say to somebody, hey, I need help, most people aren't going to say no. Most people, they won't. They may say, I don't know how to help you, but you know what? Let's go over here. I'll call my friend. And boom, all of a sudden you're into motion, you're into change, and you're out of fear, and you're working towards a solution. That in its own right is very freeing. And I think you said something to that effect as well earlier, Tim.
Yeah,
I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah, I think so. But too, I just want to kind of add on to that. Over the last year and a half, with being either physically shut down or doing virtual only, but because of social distancing, many people have come with the thought process that it's not the same because it's virtual. And although there is some truth that as human beings we crave and we thrive on interhuman contact. It's a thing. We all need it to some level. Even the introverts, and my son being one of them, being a very introverted person, even he has to have some level of physical human contact at some point. So, but even with that being said, please, if you're in need of help and you're struggling with any one of these disorders, please don't walk away from it just because you feel it's virtual and it's not the same and it's not going to help you. There are still qualified helpers, and at the end of phone lines, at the end of Zoom call lines, however you choose to talk to them, FaceTime, whatever, they're still qualified in their job. They can still help you, even if it can't be face-to-face for the time being because of the pandemic.
I used to go to meetings every week, and I've got over 36 years of sobriety. And during the pandemic, because of Zoom, I've gone to 4 meetings a week because you flip open your laptop. So I hope that I wasn't misunderstood, but I personally, and suffering from ADHD, I love seeing 60, 70 people at a meeting. And, some people are goofballs. They just put their laptop up in their bedroom or their kitchen or their bathroom or their garage. And it's fascinating that, people are just opening. They don't even think about their background. I mean, I'm thinking about mine tonight because normally I do Zoom and I have different backgrounds that I can use. And I said, Fred, does this look okay? He goes, no one's going to notice it. I notice it. But my point is, Zoom has become a way, and we're actually using it at our treatment center now. as a way to bring people in to sit in group anonymously. So, you can Zoom in. We'll give you the Zoom link. You can sign on anonymously, or you can just stop your video, mute your mic, and just observe. And then the next day we follow up with, hey, how did that feel? Did you enjoy that? And then if over time they're comfortable coming in, great. If not, you know what? Stay where you're at. But it's a way,
That's awesome.
think it's a way to introduce people to access to support and help in a way that you never could do without physically walking into a meeting or going to talk to a therapist. And, a lot of them don't want to see clients because they can't. And there's regulations if they're in hospitals or doctors' offices. So I think this has opened up a whole new world for people to access support. It's sitting in their living room, in their pajamas, maybe holding their significant other's hand while they're doing it, or all alone in their own little cubby, wherever it might be, and zooming in. And you can go online and you can find meetings all over the world. So, if you don't want to really hear what people are saying, go into parts of France and just listen to what they're, or Italians, wherever you're, or Spaniards, wherever you think would be appropriate, or Russian or Chinese, and just listen. Because you'll get a sense for people's body language that you can relate to them as well. Anyway, I'm rambling. Go ahead, Fred.
I don't mind. I like when you ramble. It lets me sit back and learn.
Yeah, but it messes with the structure.
Yeah, all my structure. So the next one's obsessive compulsive disorder. If you have OCD, you have repeated upsetting thoughts called obsessions. You do the same thing over and over again to try to make the thoughts go away. And those repeated actions are called compulsions. You know anybody with this specific disorder?
I do not. My wife says I'm a little OCD about things, but I don't quite believe her. I have
a sense she's right.
She probably is. She's right about most things, to be honest with you.
There you go.
But I call it micro OCDs. I am obsessive about certain things, and I have to have. There are some things I have to have in a certain way. And so this is the one area where I will give in and agree to her. My closet has to be arranged in a certain way. I have my dress shirts in this side, and then my suit pants, and then my suit coats, and then my button-up shirts, and then my hockey and football jerseys and things like that.
Yeah, so clearly there's no sign of OCD there. No,
none.
We're not going to judge you. We'll just support your wife on this.
My t-shirt.
We'll move on to the list.
My t-shirt drawer might be sorted by color, but that's not beside the point.
There you go. He still wanted to add more. Don't forget, denial is not just a river in Egypt, brother.
No, it's apparently in my t-shirt drawer at home. So
yeah, there you go.
So another one is personality disorders. And people with personality disorders have extreme and inflexible personality traits that are distressing to the person and may cause problems in work, school, or social relationships. Personality disorders can include antisocial personality disorder and borderline personality disorder. I think
you should take that one, Fred. I think that one really just kind of fits like a nice sweater on you, brother.
Well, I have a lot of personalities, but they're all good.
That's a different disorder. Multiple personalities I don't think the same thing as a personality disorder. It could be.
But he's acknowledged it.
I've acknowledged it, and that's step one.
But under the wrong level. So we got to keep going down the list, make sure he doesn't fit anything.
Well, I don't have any of these. Psychotic disorder. People with psychotic disorders experience a range of symptoms, including hallucinations and delusions. An example of a psychotic disorder is schizophrenia. So this is a very serious mental health issue.
Yes,
and this is why we wanted to talk about all these mental health issues, to show you that there are so many extremes to it, where one you might be able to live with. This is one that needs to be medically treated with medications and stuff that you're not going to solve just by, I don't know, you can't just figure it out or anything. Whether it's chemical imbalances in your body, DNA imbalances. We need more. I need my science gal to do some stats on
it. It's more than just a Google search and figure out if there's something you can change in your life. There's counseling needed. There's medication typically that's needed to assist with those folks, to help them, just to kind of standardize themselves. level themselves.
As I like to say, there's this is not one of those YouTube solution oriented. It's like when I talk about if somebody breaks their arm, you don't go on YouTube and figure out how to set it. You take them to the emergency department immediately, and there are certain things that need a much higher level of care. So, Fred, what's left on the list? So
we got suicide disorder, which, let's see what that is. I'll stay up for this one. Let's see if I could read it. Suicidal behavior. Suicide causes immeasurable pain, suffering, and loss to individuals, families, and communities nationwide. So this is where my passion began, was trying to come up with suicide prevention plans to try to lessen it, because I've had too many people in my life either attempt it or unfortunately succeed. And there was, I don't tell this story very often, but there was an instance where it happened to a stranger to me in a house I was at. And it affected me for years after, even though I didn't know him. It was more the fact that, because it was the roommate of a girl I was dating, and it still affected me, even though I didn't know him. So I can't even imagine the other end of it when you're connected to a person. And unfortunately, I've suffered through a few of those. And this started when I was very young. At 10 years old, my neighbor took his own life. And that still carried a lot with me, because he happened to be a kid that everybody picked on. Everybody did, even including me. I'm not guiltless in it. He was I guess for the lack of a better term, he was a weaker individual that I thought I could be bigger than, but I was 10. I didn't have the tools. Plus I was dealing with my own physical and sexual abuse issues. So I just transferred them to somebody else. I let my anger out on him, and it turns out he was being abused at home, and everything just rippled down. But we were 10 years old. So these are tough things. So suicide, has it affected either of you? I know, Scott, you did have suicidal tendencies, correct?
Well, clearly, Tim, this is not an anonymous program.
No,
that's fine.
No, I wrote. That's fine, right? No, I wrote in my book that I tried to take my own life, and it was pretty traumatic, and it took a long time to process all that. And and I can remember my mom told me once that people that attempt suicide are selfish, and it was one of the things in my head the day that happened that kind of kept me from going over the ledge, and I was literally on the ledge, and it was one of those things that, nearly ended my life. And I was at a point in my life where I didn't see a way out. So I know what that deep hole can be like. It's interesting what Fred was talking about with his friend, that experience that he had through his girlfriend's friend, that's called trauma. And if that isn't treated over time, that particular type of trauma will infect you almost like an earwig or a bad flu, but it won't go away. It sits there and it festers, and most people don't even know what they're going to do. By the way, speaking of knowing what they're doing, I saw you a minute ago looking away, Tim. Clearly your wife was texting you, reminding you do have OCD. And since this is a structured show, we want to get it on the record. I had that look like, I hope she's telling me I do have. Oh, okay, I got it now.
Well, let's move on to our last one, which is trauma and stress-related disorders. So that's PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yes.
Can occur after living through or seeing a traumatic event. So I think that leads into what you were just saying. I guess being involved or being at the house, not involved. I wasn't involved in his suicide. Being present, it creates a trauma and a stress-related disorder. Luckily, I did figure it out, and luckily being an author helped a lot, because I was able to write stories about it. And now I've moved it into a positive where I could try to help other people solve this problem by just being honest and telling people, I've suffered from this. It's okay. You could get through all this.
It's interesting that many times people go through PTSD without recognizing or realizing that that's what's going on. Because unfortunately, especially in this country, in America, many times when we talk about PTSD, it's only with soldiers, people who have come back from war. And that discussion needs to continue. Those those men and women have, have a long road ahead of them, and that's treatment that they need and things. That's a very real situation for them. But PTSD also exhibits itself in other ways. It can come from physical abuse, sexual abuse. It can come from verbal, emotional abuse. There's a great many things that can trigger PTSD. It doesn't have to be just wartime exercises or wartime experiences. It can be a great many things. And that was one of the reasons why when we went to therapy, our doctor told us that we had suffered hospitalization PTSD because of what had gone on in the hospital. I was not aware that I had PTSD. I wasn't aware that was what was triggering parts of my anxiety or other things. But we had experienced a trauma, and that trauma triggered anxiety, which was triggering this stress disorder. And so it's acknowledging that you have these things and being able to again speak out to someone that you trust. Scott mentioned that earlier. The variety of people that you can talk to that would care to hear what you have to say and are concerned about what you have to say. PTSD is a very real thing, and it can be very, very detrimental if not taken care of.
Yeah, and, it's fascinating because, to your point, a catastrophic loss can create that.
Yeah,
stress over loss of a job or a career, or watching a family member or friend expire. I mean, it can be we just had a situation personally with me where I was going through something, and my kids kind of sat down and confronted me. They thought that I wasn't processing things. I've been processing things differently since I lost my folks, which has been almost 5 years now.
Okay.
And, I thought, well, okay, so I did a deeper dive, called some people, talked to a couple, clinical experts, and, been working on it, journaling, reading. But most of us don't know it. And what's fascinating about PTSD, fascinating in the sense of people don't know this, is if you I'm going to use the military for a second because we're working with veterans now, so I'm seeing a whole slew of it. But
okay.
Or first responder, because of the work they do, and they can't really, there's no data dump at the end of the day. If you are the person who has the untreated trauma and you suffer from PTSD and it goes untreated, if you're living with somebody, the odds are, I'm not going to frame this the right way, it's actually bleeding over on them. They actually can start to suffer from it as well because you're suffering from it and it's not getting treated because you're acting out, or you're acting down, you're acting up, or you're depressed. All those things we just discussed are impacting the people around you. In this disease of addiction, we talk about the fact that the person who's impaired each day will impact 7 people negatively because their mood swings, their impairment, the fact that they're half there, or they're seeking, medication, or they're hungover, or they're detoxing, whatever it might be. So, if 15% of the population has an active addiction that will erupt, and 7 out of 10 people, 7 people each day, 70%, 85% of the country. And, most anybody who has something going on has underlying issues, co-occurring, whatever it might be. But, this has been enlightening, Fred, for me.
Yeah. And like I said, it's just an introduction. We're going to talk about mental health on every show we talk about. It always has a mental health element built into it. So before we do go, of course, we have to always tell people that the suicide hotline is the first step before calling us. If you have an issue and you're thinking about suicide and having suicidal issues, you have to take this first step and dial 1-800-273-8255. You could also chat with them by texting 741-741. There's no minimum age. You could receive support at any time, even on holidays. As long as you have a phone, you could call the number and talk to someone. It's available for non-English speakers and people who are deaf or hard of hearing. So it's not a perfect process. It's a beginning. If you feel the urges, reach out, save your life, because your life does matter. Because like Scott always says, somebody loves you, right?
Absolutely.
Somebody always loves you.
Any type of ideation, please reach out and talk to somebody. It's crucial.
Yeah, and it's gonna change the way. Hopefully, we could reach out, and hopefully, we're touching people with our stories and with our just definitions, and maybe we're awakening some people. But at the same time, we want people to be talking about it. We have to keep an open mind, open heart, and an open soul to accept people and stop putting stigmas on people. Instead of treating them like they're different, let's treat them like they're just sick and need attention, to some medical attention, or just you to say you love them. There's got to be a reason, and there's always a solution. So I want to thank you, Tim, for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed it.
Oh, it's been my pleasure to be here. This has been a fun conversation.
Yeah, it's got to be the longest 5 minutes you've ever spent on a podcast.
I did tell him.
Well, Fred did tell me
he will be with us for about 5 minutes, and I said, "Well, why can't he hang out?" He goes, "Well, I don't know. He probably has to go straighten his shirts in his closet. He will think about it now." By the way, Fred, I don't know if you heard me when you stepped away for a second. Probably checking on dinner, but Tim was leaning away on his phone, and I think his wife was texting him going, "Honey, I think you do have OCD, so don't lie to people you don't know." I just made that up, but it just seemed ironic that
you probably weren't far off, Scott.
Yeah.
Hold up your phone, honey, you do have OCD. Talk about it. But look, I joke about it, but I think it's important, and Fred, thanks for helping us put together this platform to have this conversation, because I don't think people are talking, they're joking about sports and their travel and what's going on and politics, but there aren't a lot of people that I know, and I'm in this business and I've been in it and I'm fully immersed. I hope we get more of it. I don't see the podcast arena shifting over to this, but the fact that we're part of something that can create systemic change, it gives me a warm heart to be part of. So thanks.
Well, and I think it's important too. So what you guys are doing right here, right now. So we had a couple people message in and say their thanks. So Fred, you said even if you affect one person, well, clearly you've affected two people tonight. Okay. So if you look at it that way, so there's two people that you've helped and that you and Scott have been able to help through this. And if we can do something like that with every podcast that I put out, these episodes that you guys do here, if we're able to affect 1 to 2 people per episode, where somebody can go, I'm dealing with that as well. Holy crap, I can do it too.
Yeah,
that's a big step, man. And for people to be able to see that yes, there is a stigma out there around us for all these things. People put stigmas on everything nowadays. But if they can see that there's a normalization to these conversations, and they can be part of these conversations, what you guys are doing here, and I know that in future episodes, you guys will have it where people can call in and talk with you guys, a live line. There's ways for people to chat through the internet, through Facebook, and wherever else this has gone off to, and off into cyberspace. There's ways for people to chat live online to us. How cool is that? That people have a way for someone to hear the words that need to be heard. So kudos to both of you men for doing this. This is a really cool format, and I think that I know that when you guys do this show live, I'll be sharing it every week on my page on Focused on Forward. I think this is a really cool conversation for people to be able to see and be part of.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and I heard something today in the news. Somebody said, if we can get a dune buggy to Mars, there's nothing we can't do as a human race. So, yeah, I thought that was inspirational. Dune buggy to Mars, that cost $2.5 billion. But I agree with that. There's nothing we can't do. So
I actually just saw a tweet by the engineer that designed the NASA things that are landing on Mars right now and stuff, and he said, I had a 2.2 GPA my first year in engineering school, and I thought I wasn't good enough to be an engineer. And today, something I designed landed on Mars. So your grades matter to a point, but it's about your desire and perseverance. And that's
about your drive, yeah.
It's the same thing with your issues. If you have desire and perseverance to overcome your issue, you will overcome it, and you can live a normal life. Normal is out there, and there's ways to do it, and we're one of them. So reach out to us on anything. You could write into us at VSC_publishing@outlook.com, and we'll be live again next week. I'll post it on the Stigma page. Make sure you're joining our YouTube channel, Ending the Stigma, A Path to Recovery, and that's going to be it. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. Happy birthday, Mr. Silverman.
Thank you. And don't forget to remind people, Fred, they're looking for a structured podcast. We have that here now.
That's structure. It's
There's
all
so
about
much
structure.
You get a word in my head. I don't know what disorder that is, but it's like a friggin' hamster
Listen,
wheel. I can't.
Tim.
I'll be saying it all night.
Tim, every week he finds something to, if I wear a hat, he picks on me wearing a hat. But if you wear a hat, it's fine.
Well, I'm the guest.
It's a unique skill. You know, it comes from that comedian. What was his name? Don Rickles. I think I saw one of his shows and I wanted to be like him for a minute. That doesn't mean I don't love you, Fred. Okay,
Fred, it's clearly the joy of being a guest.
Yes,
So
it must be. Well, good, because I'm a guest on his show tomorrow.
Reciprocity is a bitch, my friend.
Scott is interviewing me on his show.
I got my questions ready to go.
They're right there. Good questions.
Look at all that structure.
Tim, I hate that word, by the way. I hate it.
Well, that's going to be it. Well, I'm not sure when our next show is. It's going to be sometime next week. We'll probably do 2 shows. We've been doing 2 shows a week, so maybe Tuesday or something like that. I'll put it up on the page. You can join the Facebook group page, and everything's there, or find me, friend me, whatever. But thank you, Tim, for joining us.
My pleasure.
And thank you, Scott, for joining us. And that's it.
I didn't know I had a choice, but I appreciate it. By the way, if anybody can guess my GPA, I'll send you a free autograph book, my old book, Tell Me No, I Dare You. You guess my GPA, and I will. No.
No, okay.
Okay.
No hat, not yet, Tim. We're working on it. Fred took a note. All right, Fred, we better get out of here. I got to eat dinner, and you guys got to go to bed.
Yeah, this is Ending the Stigma. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.
Peace out.